Alright, so I've been comparing for V60 pour overs the Timemore C2, which is the first one on the left, this random Ghost Burr hand grinder. Kind of has like a conical pre-breaker where it has to feed in before it hits the Ghost Burrs. So it's a little slow feeding and has retention. And the ZP6 by 1zPresso or 1zPresso. Yeah, so, I mean, these two fit and finish wise, I don't like the rough catch cup on the C2, like the inner part is not so smooth, so it catches the fines, and it's hard to wipe out. On both of these guys, the catch cup is nice and smooth, but on this one you have a crevice where at the bottom where everything gets caught, so it's annoying. Like you get a lot of coffee retention stuck on the bottom of that, and it seems to reduce more fines. So the whole point of Ghost Burrs, I thought, was because they reduce, they're supposed to be very consistent and not have a lot of fines, but I'm finding out of three of these, this one has the most fines. The C2 and the ZP6 are probably about the same, very low fines. Yeah, so despite the fines, you'd think that means it produces over-extracted, more bitter traditional coffee, but sometimes I do notice a little more bitterness out of this one when it's hot, and then as it cools, it's very smooth. And the one defining characteristic of this grinder is that it's, or at least the taste profile, it seems to be very low acidity and low brightness. So kind of makes the coffee more boring in a way. Maybe it just needs more seasoning, but I put some coffee through it. I'm going to test again because I'm not conclusive yet, but I was hoping as I put more coffee through, the fines would get less and maybe something will change. But yeah, I think it's still just producing a lot of fines. The C2, so it's a good, like they're all good high clarity, they make tasty coffee. And yeah, so the nicest to use, like easiest to grind, easiest to adjust. It's got the click adjustment on top. Best overall, I'd say, is the ZP6, but considering the price difference, this thing was cheap. The C2, I think they usually sell for like between 70 and 100 Canadian, and ZP6 is like 300. The Ghost Burr was kind of in between. I got a deal, it was around 200, which I think is overpriced for what I'm getting. It is a little different, so I wanted something different. It's just very mild, smooth after the initial bitterness when it's hot. But the ZP6 is also similar in regards to like toning down the acidity and bitterness, and well, more so than any of these. So yeah, so the ZP6 kind of has like, it's smooth, it's like not acidic, but it has like a nice pleasant brightness, like a bright finish. So that I think is the characteristic of the ZP6, where it's kind of smooth. It has more of a juicy tea-like kind of coffee, which is nice for like a light pour over. I haven't actually tried with like a dark roast, so I'm curious. I think it would make a dark roast nice too. Yeah. The C2 in comparison, I'd say it's similar clarity, maybe a touch less, but like the main difference in taste is that with the C2, I'm getting a little bit more traditional, like a little roastiness coming through. So like a nice bitterness that like, it's not an overpowering, it's not a bad bitterness, but like it just reminds you that it's coffee and not tea. So if you're into that, and you don't want to spend $300 on the hand grinder, this is a great deal. It's almost as easy to use. Like when you're actually grinding, the resistance is a little like it's a little harder to grind, but really it's not that bad. It's pretty easy to grind, just not as nice and smooth and easy as the ZP6, which I think has bigger burrs, so that makes it easier. Although it's not always true, because the Weber HG2, I guess it was easier if you're not doing espresso. Yeah, so not a fair comparison, because I'm remembering the HG2 hand grinder, which had big 83mm conical burrs, but for espresso it was hard, for pour over it was super easy and fast, so yeah. Yeah, so the C2 has a little bit of bitterness that just reminds you it's coffee, where the ZP6 is more tea-like. The Ghost Burr grinder, I'd say that's similar, but more hollow and boring. Like usually I'd prefer the cups from the ZP6. So if you're gonna spend money on a grinder, yeah, I wouldn't recommend the Ghost one. Also, it's the hardest to use. Like it's hard to grind with, and you feel the resistance of the coffee. The adjustment mechanism can only go so fine. There's lots of fines which don't seem to affect the taste as far as I can tell, but they might clog your filter, so it could affect your timing of your pour over. So that's a factor. They all make good coffee, but like, yeah, definitely the C2 on a budget. ZP6 if you like smooth tea-like with like a pleasant bright acidity. Not bright acidity, just a pleasant, like, bright aftertaste. Yeah, I would say it's not really an acidic profile. This one is very close. It's like a nice, you get some brightness. Actually, I think, yeah, once I had more brightness out of this. So yeah, a little more brightness, a little more balanced, like a little more normal profile where you get some bitterness and some brightness and acidity. Kind of just more coffee-like, but like it does a really nice job. Yeah. And the catch cup on this one is the easiest to clean out. It has like kind of more rounded bottom, where you can just wipe it out. So I like that. Yeah, the other thing with the Ghost Burr one, it has retention where like it takes a long time to pop, like feeding the beans into the burrs. It takes a while, and then you always get like fragments left over, so you're never really sure when you're done grinding. You have to keep turning the handle and turning it. It's annoying. C2, nice straightforward finish, where you know you're done grinding. The exception to that is for espresso. If you're grinding super fine, it doesn't work very well, or at least mine doesn't. The C2 doesn't work very well for espresso. I don't think any of these do. You can maybe do a turbo shot on that. I haven't tried on the ZP6. But yeah, I've tried grinding fine enough for espresso, maybe not even that fine, and it took forever to just ground. I think I did like 8 grams of coffee, and it was like 2 minutes of turning, and didn't seem like it was feeding into the burrs. I should also note, on the older ZP6 that I borrowed from my friend, it had a similar issue where it was just really slow to grind because it wasn't feeding the beans into the burrs. So there might have been a defect or something on some of these grinders. When I did head-to-head comparisons, I think his tasted better. So I don't know if there's a benefit of like the slow feeding that made it actually better, or if it's just that his burrs were more seasoned. Mine was still new, and it is still new, but I think they're getting more seasoned, and I think it's getting better now. It was never bad, but just side by side, his was just so much more interesting, and I think his had more like that bright, lingering aftertaste, where this one didn't have it as much at first, but I think I'm getting more of that now. But I don't have the old ones to compare, so I can't say for sure, but I'm hoping that is the case, because like with seasoning, This one's going to be fast and easy to grind with, and hopefully taste as good as the old one that took a long time to grind and a lot of turns. So yeah, just be aware if you have that. If you have the one with the issue, you know, there might be a benefit of slow feeding, so it might be better. I noticed the same thing with like P64 or Zerno or whatever, DF83. If you dump your beans in and grind fast, it has a different profile than if you slow feed it. Just the whole physics of like coffee getting jammed up in the burrs and needing to be evacuated and kind of causing a crowding situation rather than like a orderly line. So yeah, kind of like you want to avoid congestion and traffic in your grinder. If you want more flavor clarity anyway. So if you want more body and less flavor clarity, then just dump in the beans, do a cold start. Yeah. But for like a good quality light roast, slow feeding definitely makes an improvement. The only problem is you gotta slow feed consistently in order to get the same shot timing if you're doing espresso. So yeah, could complicate things. So yeah, hopefully this helps someone. Yeah, all good grinders, except probably not worth the money for that one. So yeah, it's worth trying. I mean, it was. I'll season it and see if it gets better, but yeah. So far, it's the worst. Out of these, yeah, I was so surprised this thing can keep up with the ZP6, which I think is like it's up there with the P64 with multi-purpose burrs. It makes good, tasty, not low clarity coffee. Like you get the flavors, and it's super smooth. The multi-purpose burrs at 64 millimeter multi-purpose SSP burrs at lower RPM, it's very smooth as well, but a little less forgiving. So like this kind of covers up. It's a conical thing, I think, but it covers up the defects in your coffee. So if you have a roast that's under roasted or just, you know, not a perfect tasting bean, it seems to kind of cover that up. I noticed with one coffee, I was getting more of like a boozy, like, I don't know, it was a little bit of like a fermenty taste that was in the bean, most likely. It was being illustrated more or highlighted more on the P64. Where the ZP6 kind of just made it juicy and smooth and nice. So yeah, it probably, I'm sure this one will work better with some coffees and this one will work better with others. So it's nice to have options, but too many options make it more difficult to decide, like, what am I doing? What kind of coffee am I doing? Which grinder do I put it in? What brew method? What do I do? All right, the end.